Welcome to Crisis in Perception, where we examine the systems shaping our world one book at a time.
Today, we are turning our lens on a novel that is, well, it's hostile, it's abrasive, and unfortunately for us, it is frighteningly prophetic.
It really is.
hmm
We're looking at Paul Beatty's 1996 breakout masterpiece, The White Boy Shuffle.
And it's a trip. I mean, it's a really challenging but incredibly rewarding book.
Absolutely. And before we really get into the weeds, I want to stick a pin in that word you used, prophetic.
Mm.
Because
hmm
usually when we call a book prophetic, we mean it predicted, I don't know, a specific technology or maybe a political event.
Right, like it predicted smartphones or something.
Exactly. But Beatty, he predicted a feeling. He wrote this in the mid-90s. I mean, this is pre-social media, pre-Obama, really the tail end of the 20th century.
For a completely different world in some ways.
Totally different world.
Mm.
But the atmosphere of this book, it feels like it was written this morning on Twitter.
It really does. It deals with the commodification of trauma, the exhaustion of having to represent your people, and just the sheer overwhelming absurdity of identity politics.
Like all there.
But the central tension, and this is really the core systemic question we're going to wrestle with today, is about performance.
Performance in what sense? Like acting on a stage?
Performance in the sense of survival. The book asks, how does your racial identity transform into a script? You know, how much of who you are is actually just you reciting lines that history or white people or even your own community handed to you?
Wow. So it's the story of a guy who realizes he's in a play he didn't even audition for.
That's a perfect way to put it. It's the story of a reluctant messiah. The protagonist, Gunnar Kaufman, he really, really does not want to lead anyone.
He just wants to be left alone.
He just wants to be left alone. But he's living in a society that is absolutely desperate to turn him into a symbol.
Which is a heavy concept.
Mhm.
But we have to establish a ground rule for you, the listener, before we go any further.
A really important one.
Because if you pick up The White Boy Shuffle expecting some dry sociological treatise, you are going to be so confused. This book is a satire. It is hilarious.
It's laugh out loud funny, but often in a way that makes you feel a little guilty for laughing. It's that kind of humor.
Oh, absolutely. And that's the rule we need to set. We're treating this satire not as comic relief, but as a diagnostic tool.
I love that phrasing, satire as diagnosis.
Because sometimes, realism tries too hard to make sense of the world. Realism assumes there's a need, cause, and effect.
Right. Realism assumes the world is, at its core, rational. But if you're analyzing a system like racism in America, you are analyzing a system that is inherently irrational.
That doesn't make logical sense.
It makes no sense. So Beatty's argument, his whole method, is that only absurdity, only complete off-the-wall nonsense can accurately map it. He uses these crazy, surreal situations to expose the invisible wires of the system that realism tends to just smooth over or ignore.
So as we go through this deep dive, when we hit the absurd moments, and trust me, there are some wild ones involving like atomic bombs and basketball superstars who can't miss,
Yeah.
we need to ask, what wire is he exposing here? What part of the machine is he showing us?
Precisely. That's the game.
Okay, so let's start with the architect of this madness, Paul Beatty himself. For those who haven't read him, how do we even characterize his voice? He's not exactly Oprah's book club material.
No, definitely not. If you've read his later book, The Sellout, which won the Booker Prize, you already know the vibe. Beatty is dense. He's hyper-literate.
Oh, incredibly so.
He will reference Schopenhauer, then Japanese puppet theater, and then 90s hip-hop all in the same paragraph. It can be dizzying, but I think his defining characteristic is that he fundamentally refuses the uplift narrative.
Okay, define that for us, the uplift narrative.
So think about the standard civil rights story arc, or really just the standard American movie arc. You have a marginalized character, they face oppression, they struggle, they maintain their dignity through it all, and eventually they overcome, they triumph. The arc of the moral universe bends toward justice.
It's the struggle ennobles you idea, the belief that suffering makes you a better, stronger person.
Yes. Exactly. And Paul Beatty looks at that entire narrative and says, I don't think so. In his view, suffering doesn't necessarily make you noble. Sometimes it just makes you tired.
Or weird.
Or angry, or cynical. His characters don't move from oppression to triumph. They move from confusion to exhaustion.
They get chewed up by the system.
They get chewed up by the machine. And that brings us to our protagonist, the man inside that machine, Gunnar Kaufman.
Gunnar is such a fascinating entry point because he doesn't start from the bottom in that traditional sense.
Yeah.
He starts as a total outsider to his own demographic.
Right. Gunnar is a black teenager, but he's being raised in affluent, very white Santa Monica. He is completely disconnected from what society thinks of as the black experience.
It's a capital B, capital E version of it.
Totally. He describes himself as having no rhythm. All of his friends are white. His understanding of black culture basically comes from watching TV.
Yeah.
He's essentially playing the role of the cool black guy for his white friend group.
But it's a role based on stereotypes. He doesn't even really understand himself. He's just guessing.
He's just guessing. And there is a specific anecdote early in the book that I think is the absolute key to understanding Gunnar. And honestly, to understanding the failure of 90s liberalism. It's his description of his elementary school education.
The multicultural curriculum.
Yes. But it was a very specific brand of multiculturalism. It was this aggressive, almost violent attempt to erase difference. Gunnar calls it the eracism curriculum.
Eracism, E-R-A-C-I-S-M, like you're erasing race.
Exactly. He talks about his teacher wearing this T-shirt that listed black, white, red, yellow, brown with big red lines crossed through all of them. And at the bottom, it just said human.
Which on the surface, it sounds lovely. It's the whole I don't see color bumper sticker philosophy.
It's well-intentioned, maybe, but Gunnar points out how weirdly hollow that actually is in practice.
How so?
Well, it creates this cognitive dissonance. There's a scene where the teacher is trying to teach a physics lesson about light. And she explains that technically, black is the absorption of all colors, and white is the reflection of all colors.
Basic science.
Right. And then she pivots immediately to a social lesson and asks the class to name things that are colorblind.
And the kids are probably saying the standard, Sunday school answers.
Yeah, they say justice or the president or love.
Yeah.
And Gunnar, being a little literalist kid, raises his hand and says dogs.
Because dogs are literally colorblind.
Right, he's taking it literally. But then the story gets darker. He gets sent to the school nurse for a physical, and this scene is pure Beatty absurdity. The doctor is checking him for a hernia, which is traumatic enough for a kid.
Oh, for sure.
But then he decides to test him for color blindness.
Ye literal eye test with the colored dots.
The eye test. And Gunnar asks this question that just cuts through the whole philosophy of the school. He asks the doctor, if we're all supposed to be colorblind, isn't it hard to do if you can actually see color?
Wow. That's the diagnostic tool right there. The school is teaching him to ignore the evidence of his own eyes.
Exactly. It just highlights the absolute hollowness of that I don't see color rhetoric. It didn't prepare him for reality at all. Gunnar notes that while the classroom preached that race didn't matter, the playground ran on Polak jokes and stereotypes.
So he had a role there, too.
He was the cool black guy, a safe, non-threatening mascot for his white friends. He thought that was his identity. He was comfortable.
He was a safe black person because he wasn't really black in the way the scary news reports at the time depicted blackness.
Until the system shocks him. And this is the inciting incident of the novel. His mother, Gunnar Kaufman, decides her children are too soft. They are too disconnected from their roots.
She wants to give them a real experience.
A real black experience. So she packs them up and moves the family from the beachside safety of Santa Monica to the inner city neighborhood of Hillside.
Which is basically Compton or South Central LA by another name?
Essentially. And just watch what happens to Gunnar's role here. This is so crucial. In Santa Monica, his script was the cool black friend.
Right.
The moment he steps foot in Hillside, the script flips completely upside down. He is immediately labeled the white boy, the Oreo.
Because he talks differently, he walks differently, he doesn't have the right shoes, the right slang.
He literally does not know the code. There's a scene where he tries to bond with the local gang, the gun-toting hooligans. And Gunnar, being this nerdy, well-read kid, thinks the way to earn their respect is to act like Henry David Thoreau.
Wait, Thoreau? Like Walden? That Thoreau?
Yes. He sets up a camping tent in the middle of a department store. He thinks, I will show them my radical independence through civil disobedience.
That is spectacularly misguided.
Oh my God. It's hilarious, but it's also deeply tragic, He's just trying to find a way in. But the key insight here is that Gunnar is a projection screen. He's a vessel.
What do you mean by that?
The white kids in Santa Monica projected coolness onto him. The black kids in Hillside project otherness or inauthenticity onto him. He has no stable self.
So he has no agency?
None. He is defined entirely by what the community around him needs him to be at that moment.
And this theme of projection isn't just a high school problem, right?
Yeah.
This follows him as he starts to accidentally rise to power. Because Gunnar does become a leader in this neighborhood.
He does.
But not because he's ambitious at all.
No, his rise is characterized by extreme passivity. He's like a leaf in the wind.
Yeah.
He writes this poetry that is deeply cynical, very dark, bordering on nihilistic.
We'll get to that.
But the community reads it and says, oh, this is revolutionary struggle poetry. This is our voice. They misinterpret him completely because they need a poet.
And he becomes a basketball star. Yeah.
Again, by total accident. He just happens to be tall, and he happens to be best friends with a true prodigy, a guy named Nicholas Scobie, who we'll definitely talk more about in a minute. Gunnar just kind of stands near the basket, but the neighborhood needs a basketball hero, so they draft him into that role too.
It's like he's falling upwards. He's not climbing. He's just being carried by everyone else's expectations.
That's it. It's a total displacement of agency. Gunnar's rise is actually a loss of self. He becomes a public utility. The system needs a leader, so it grabs him by the collar, stuffs him into the suit, and says, you're the guy now.
Speaking of being forced into suits, or maybe forced out of them,
Yeah.
we have to talk about his ancestry. Because before Gunnar fully accepts this fate, he recites his family history. And this, for me, was one of the strongest, most biting satirical sections of the entire book.
The Kaufman lineage. This is brilliant. I mean, usually in a novel about Black identity, you have that roots moment.
Totally. You expect to hear about the proud ancestor who fought back, the warrior king, the grandmother who held the whole family together through sheer will.
The pillar of strength.
Yeah. And Beatty gives us Euripides Kaufman.
Euripides Kaufman.
Tell us about him.
So Euripides is a slave in Boston, but he isn't a rebel. He's an opportunist. He realizes that the local white people view him as a sort of pickaninny charm, a good luck charm.
That's so dehumanizing.
Completely, but Euripides, instead of resisting it, he leans into it. He charges them a fee to rub his head for luck.
He monetizes the racism. He literally puts a price tag on it.
He capitalizes on his own dehumanization. He figures out that if he performs the role of the happy, lucky slave perfectly, he can extract money from the oppressors, and he eventually earns enough to buy his own freedom.
But it's a tainted freedom, isn't it? I mean, it was bought by selling his dignity piece by piece.
And that's the question Beatty poses. Is that resistance? Or is it collaboration? Is it genius? Or is it treason? It's impossible to say.
And he's not the only one. There's Swen Kaufman, this one. This one really blew my mind.
Swen is the runaway slave.
Right. But usually, a runaway slave runs north to freedom.
Not Swen. Swen runs to another plantation.
Why? I mean, why on earth would he do that?
Because he's a dancer. He's an artist. And he feels that the choreography of the field work on this one specific plantation in the South is better for his art.
That's deeply twisted.
It's grotesque. He voluntarily re-enslaves himself because the rhythm of the hose and the work songs allow him to create what he calls a dance opera.
So what is Beatty saying with that? That sounds almost offensive on the surface.
He's attacking the idea of suffering as art. You see this all the time in music, in film, where Black trauma is stylized and turned into this beautiful aesthetic product for consumption. Swen values the aesthetic of the struggle more than the actual liberation from it. It's a brutal critique of how we consume Black suffering as entertainment.
And then, closer to the present, we get Wolfgang Kaufman.
Wolfgang, the man who literally painted whites-only signs for a living.
He lived in the Jim Crow South, and his job, his trade, was painting the signs that enforced segregation.
He was maintaining the very infrastructure of his own oppression because, it paid bills. It was a steady job.
So Gunnar looks at this family tree, the sellout, the aesthete, the collaborator, and he's just ashamed.
He's ashamed, but he's also realizing a systemic truth. Beatty frames these ancestors not necessarily as villains or traitors, but as extreme examples of survival.
They did what they had to do?
They did what they had to do. The system forces Black survival to be contingent on performing for a white audience. You survive by being what they want you to be. The lucky charm, the beautiful dancer, the quiet sign painter. Identity is structurally imposed. And look at the symbolism there. It represents compliance. It's doing the absolute bare minimum to exist within the system without drawing fatal attention to yourself. It's a survival mechanism. You don't stand out, you don't groove, you don't express yourself, you just shuffle.
It's the physical embodiment of all his ancestors' compromises.
Exactly. And this performance isn't just something he does at parties. The book suggests this performance is institutionalized. There's that incredible scene at his high school, Phyllis Wheatley High, about the assemblies.
Oh, the young Black and Latino men. Endangered species assemblies.
Just the name alone, it sounds like a government grant proposal.
It probably was. That's the satire. It's bureaucratic fatalism. The school administrators need the students to be at risk so they can get funding to save them.
If the students are just normal, well-adjusted kids, the funding dries up. The whole system collapses.
And there's that moment where a photographer from the local paper comes to take a picture of Gunnar and his friend Nicholas Scobie.
And they know exactly what to do, without a word.
They instantly pose. They adopt the hard, tough street glares that are expected of them by the media. They know the script.
Because if they smiled or looked bookish or looked happy, they wouldn't fit the caption, endangered species. They are collaborating in their own stereotyping because that is the only role available to them in the public imagination.
You mentioned Nicholas Scobie. We need to pause on him because while Gunnar is our narrator, Scobie is, I don't know, he's like the tragic heart of the book.
Scobie is the tragedy, for sure. Gunnar survives by being cynical and detached. Scobie is destroyed because he is pure.
And Scobie has a very specific problem. A curse, really.
He is perfect. Specifically at basketball, he literally cannot miss a shot.
And you mean that literally, not like he's a great player.
No, I mean it literally. Physics seems to bend for him. He can throw the ball backwards over his head from the parking lot, and it will swish through the net every time.
Which sounds like a superpower. I mean, that's every kid's dream.
But Beatty brilliantly reveals it as a nightmare. Because Scobie tries to miss, he wants to fail, he wants to be human. But the ball just keeps going in.
And because he cannot fail, he ceases to be a person.
And becomes a commodity. The community claims him.
The fans demand he never miss. The system demands he be a god. There's that awful scene where he dives into the stands to save a ball, and he lands on a little girl, and the crowd boos her for getting in his way.
That's horrifying.
It is. It strips him of his humanity. He becomes an object of worship, which is just another form of dehumanization. He's not a person anymore. He's a function.
And this leads to that quiet, really philosophical conversation he has with Gunnar about the tie game.
Yes. This is so crucial for understanding the exhaustion theme of the whole book.
Their coach, a Japanese-American man named Shimimoto, tells them about Japanese baseball, where games can end in a tie if they go on for too long.
And Scobie is just entranced by this idea.
He's obsessed with it. The idea of a game where nobody wins, nobody loses, and nobody keeps score. That is heaven to him. He is exhausted by competition. He's exhausted by the expectation to win, to represent, to overcome.
He just wants to exist,
Yeah.
to play for the sake of playing.
And that word, exhaustion, seems to be the operative word for this entire generation of characters Beatty is writing about.
It is the emotional core of the novel.
Mm-hmm.
And it's what separates the White Boy Shuffle from those uplift civil rights stories we talked about. In those stories, the characters have this limitless energy for the fight.
Right. They never get tired.
They never get tired.
Yeah.
But in Beatty's world, the characters are they're so tired of the performance.
So high school ends, and in a normal coming-of-age story, this is where the character goes out into the world and finds themselves.
Right.
But Gunnar goes to college, Boston University, and things just get even more absurd.
This is where the satire really turns its guns on the black leadership class and the activist class. Beatty is just ruthless here.
Mm-hmm. He creates these student organizations that are just perfect, vicious caricatures of every political group you'd find on a college campus.
So Gunnar arrives, and he's immediately courted by these different factions.
Exactly. The first group is Ambrosia, which is the Black Student Union.
Ambrosia, of course.
It's run by this guy named Dexter Waverly, and they represent this very superficial, aesthetic form of activism. They aren't actually doing anything for the community. They are performing Black excellence for an audience.
There's that scene with the fashion show.
Oh, the literacy fundraiser. It's perfect satire. They hold a fashion show to raise awareness for literacy in the inner city, but the models are walking down the runway in bikini.
And bikinis.
Holding signs with grammar rules on them.
Like I before E except after C.
While striking a pose. It's absolutely ridiculous. But Beatty is critiquing the idea that you can solve deep systemic rot with consumerism or, positive vibes.
And then there's a group concoction.
The Human Student Union. This is for mixed-race students.
Mm-hmm.
And their entire existence seems to be debating which boxes to check on forms. Do I check African-American? Do I check Latino? Do I check other? What does other even mean?
It's the bureaucracy of identity again. That's a recurring theme.
It's the slicing and dicing of human beings into market segments.
Yeah.
And then my personal favorite target of Beatty's wrath, SWAPO.
SWAPO, which stands for Support with All Power Our something or other. forget.
It doesn't matter what it stands for because the group is entirely composed of progressive white students who are just desperate to save Black people.
There's a scene that made me cringe so hard I almost had to close the book. The character named John Brown.
Literally named John Brown, the historical allusion is not subtle.
He's a white student, and he's crying. He's actually weeping in front of Gunnar because he wants to help so bad. And he asks him, "What can I do? Just tell me what to do."
And this is such a pivotal moment for Gunnar, because in a normal book, the protagonist might give a speech about allyship and say, here is how we can work together.
Right.
But Gunnar is tired. He is so tired. He just looks at this crying white boy and says, shed the John Brown vibe. I don't need no crackers kissing me on the forehead like I'm a swaddling infant.
It's just brutal.
It's a complete takedown of the white savior complex. Beatty is showing that all these groups, Ambrosia, Swapo, Concoction, they don't care about Gunnar the person. They care about Gunnar the symbol. They want a mascot for their cause.
But the incredible irony is Gunnar plays into it. He inadvertently becomes this Negro demagogue, as the book calls him. He starts writing this poetry that is actively hostile to the whole movement.
And they love it. They eat it up.
He writes a collection called Watermelon in.
Of course he does. The title alone is just...
It's perfect.
And the poems are just deeply, profoundly nihilistic. One is titled, Give Me Liberty or Give Me Crib Death.
That is darker than dark. That's a black hole.
It is pure negation. He is saying, I would rather not exist than continue to exist in this broken system. But the public, the activists, they interpret these poems as empowering anthems of rage.
So Gunnar is shouting, it's all hopeless, and the crowd is cheering, yes, lead us to the hopelessness.
And that's the systemic critique. The system is so desperate for a leader that it will cannibalize even a nihilist to fill the role. The vacancy for Black Messiah is open, the job description is posted, and the system will shove anyone into that suit, even someone screaming, no, I don't want the job.
This leads us to the darkest, most complex, and honestly the most dangerous theme of the book. We have to talk about the suicide motif.
We do, and we need to be very, very clear here for the listener. We are analyzing a literary device. We are not talking about mental health in the clinical sense. In the world of the white boy shuffle, suicide is used as a political argument.
It's a metaphor.
It is metaphor. And it starts with Scobie, our perfect basketball player. Scobie eventually jumps from a roof. He leaves a note that references Japanese puppet theater bunraku. And this idea of cutting your own strings, of freeing yourself from the puppeteer.
So why does he do it in the logic of the book?
Because his dream, his love for jazz, his love for basketball was co-opted. It was taken from him. He realized that as long as he was alive and playing, he belonged to the audience. He belonged to the system. He refused to be a symbol anymore.
So his suicide is a grotesque protest, as the book calls it. It is the only way to exit the performance.
It is the ultimate refusal. And Gunnar takes this concept and amplifies it to a national, even global scale. He starts a movement.
The emancipation disintegration.
This is the part of the book that is really hard to wrap your head around. Gunnar proposes a mass suicide. He essentially says, if the system wants our bodies so bad as fuel, as symbols, as targets, let's remove them from the equation.
He asks the U.S. government to drop an atomic bomb on his neighborhood, Hillside.
He even names the bomb Svelte Guy, a horrifyingly bleak satire of the fat man and little boy bombs from World War II.
So how are we supposed to read this? Is he just insane at this point?
We have to analyze this not as insanity, but as the ultimate sit-in. Think about the logic of a sit-in during the civil rights movement. You refuse to move until justice is served.
Okay.
Gunnar takes that to its most extreme conclusion. He argues that the American system requires Black suffering to function. It requires Black labor, Black entertainment, Black bodies to police and incarcerate.
It's the fuel for the engine.
It's the fuel. So Gunnar's logic is, if you remove the fuel, if you negate your own existence, you break the engine. It's a refusal to move, a refusal to improve, a refusal to participate in the American experiment any longer.
So it's a strike.
It's a strike against life itself, because life under these conditions, he argues, is just a script written by someone else. Now, obviously, Beatty isn't advocating this. He's showing us the sheer absurdity of the situation. He's saying, look how trapped these characters are, that this starts to look like the only logical exit.
It reminds me of the ancestors again.
Yeah.
Euripides sold his dignity for freedom. Swen sold his freedom for art. Gunnar is willing to sell his life for silence.
For an end to the noise, for an end to the expectation, for the right to just not be.
Wow. We've talked a lot about the white system, the media, and the expectations from outside. But we also have to talk about the community itself. Because Gunnar isn't just pressured by white people.
No, and that's a crucial and brave part of Beatty's critique. He doesn't let the community off the hook. Community in the White Boy Shuffle is deeply ambivalent. It's a source of warmth and protection, yes, but it is also a source of intense coercion.
The character of Psycho Loco is the perfect example here.
Psycho Loco is the local gang leader in Hillside. He essentially drafts Gunnar into friendship. There's a line where Scobie tells Gunnar, "Fate picks your friends."
Right, you don't get to choose your fate or your friends in this world.
Psycho Loco is violent, he's dangerous. But he's also the enforcer of community norms. He protects Gunnar, but he also demands loyalty. He makes Gunnar write poems for the gang. He drags him to these things called the misery fests.
The misery fests? What are those?
They're these weekly gatherings where everyone in the community comes together to air their grievances. It sounds therapeutic on the surface, right?
It sounds like a support group.
But Beatty portrays it as a spectacle of trauma. It becomes a kind of contest of who has it worse, a performance of suffering.
And it's there that the burden of representation gets really heavy.
Exactly. The community projects all of its hopes and dreams onto Gunnar and Scobie. They need Scobie to make those impossible shots, to make them feel better about their own lives. They need Gunnar to write those angry poems to give them a voice.
So when Scobie dies, it's not just a personal loss for his friends.
When Scobie dies, the community doesn't just mourn a friend. They mourn a lost asset.
Yeah.
They are angry that their symbol is broken. Their source of vicarious pride is gone.
It's crushing. It's like, you can't just be yourself. You have to be the race. You have to carry the weight of everyone else's dreams and failures on your shoulders.
And that includes legacy. Gunnar is expected to follow in the footsteps of his father, who was a cop, and ironically also suicidal, and his strange ancestors. The community acts as this crushing weight that replaces individual agency with collective obligation.
So let's zoom out. We've been deep in the 90s, deep in this satire. But why does this book matter now? Because listening to all this, I'm not just thinking about books, I'm thinking about the internet.
Oh, absolutely. If we connect this to the present day, the idea of identity as performance has only intensified 1,000 times over.
For sure.
In '96, Gunnar performed for his neighborhood and maybe a local news camera. Today, we're all performing for a potential global audience 24/7.
The pressure to brand yourself, to have a personal brand.
Exactly. Think about the phenomenon of main character syndrome. We joke about it on TikTok and social media, but the White Boy Shuffle shows us the dark side of that. Gunnar is a reluctant main character. Today, people are fighting to be the main character, not realizing that it's a systemic trap.
Because once you are the main character, you have to follow the plot. You can't deviate.
You have to stick to the script. When you brand your identity, whether it's racial, political, sexual, whatever, you are creating a persona that you then have to maintain. You lose the freedom to be complex. You lose the freedom to be contradictory. You lose the freedom to change your mind.
And the moral spectacle aspect, too.
Yeah.
Those student groups at BU Ambrosia Swapo, they remind me so much of performative allyship online.
The black squares on Instagram, the hashtag activism. Beatty satirized that desire to look good rather than do good decades ago. He showed us that often activism is just another form of social climbing or identity management. It's about your performance, not about the outcome.
And I think the exhaustion theme hits hardest of all today. We hear a lot about resilience, Black resilience, the resilience of the human spirit. It's meant to be a compliment.
And Beatty asks a very uncomfortable question. Why do we have to be so resilient in the first place? Why is the baseline condition one that requires constant superhuman resilience just to get by?
It's an unfair burden to demand that someone always be strong.
The novel suggests that constantly overcoming is exhausting. Sometimes, like Scobie, people just want to play a game where no one keeps score. They want the luxury of mediocrity. They want the luxury of just existing without that existence being a political statement.
It challenges the demand for constant strength. It validates the feeling of just being tired.
And that connects directly back to our channel's whole mission, crisis in perception. We often think our identity is something internal that we express outward. We think, I am this person, so I act this way.
But Beatty flips that entirely.
He suggests the opposite. That identity is an output of the systems we live in. School, media, family history, community pressure, they pour all this data into us, and we output a performance to survive them. We aren't the authors of our own lives, we're just the actors reading the lines.
And satire is the only way to see the script.
Right. Realism tries to smooth over the cracks. It tries to make the play look natural, like it's not a play at all. Satire pries those cracks wide open. It shows you the stage lights. It points out the director screaming from the wings in a system that is inherently irrational. Only irrational behavior, like asking for an atomic bomb on your own house, can show us how truly broken things are.
It's a heavy book. It's a complicated book. But it feels like a necessary one.
It forces us to look at resistance differently. Resistance isn't always about fighting back loudly with a protest sign. Sometimes it's about silence. Sometimes it's about refusal. Or sometimes it's just about shuffling awkwardly from side to side.
The white boy shuffle.
The awkward dance of trying to fit into a shape that was never made for you.
That is a perfect place to leave it. This deep dive has been based on The White Boy Shuffle by Paul Beatty. It's a wild ride of a book, and we highly encourage you to read it, actually read the sentences, or grab it from your local library to get the full force of Beatty's incredible language.
It's an experience you really won't forget.
This project is free and publicly accessible. If you'd like to support the time, tools, and research behind Crisis in Perception, you can become a supporter on Patreon.
For a shorter visual overview of this topic, see the mini explainer linked in the description.
If you enjoy this kind of systems-level analysis, please like, subscribe, and comment with books or topics you'd like us to explore next. Thanks for listening.